Let's get a quick take on Colorado Inside Out legend Tom Tancredo telling the Denver Post that he is considering a run for governor in 2018. Tancredo made headlines after stating that he was infuriated that Republicans didn't speak up after the cancellation of an upcoming conference in Colorado Springs, organized by the same group behind the violent Charlottesville rally. Patty Calhoun from Westward. So Tom Tancredo is great at making headlines. If there's one thing he can manufacture, that's definitely the top one. Is this just a salvo that he's trying to get Republicans to pay attention to this, or do you think there's any serious threat that Tom Tancredo is going to be anywhere near the ballot in 2018?
He's about all that the Republican Party is missing right now in that clown car for 2018. You know, Tom makes headlines if he goes to the opening of an envelope, and I think this is a little more serious. I think he's actually looking at it because he's fed up with what's happened to the Colorado Republican Party, and he knows he can get people talking, and, you know, he can also get votes. Let's remember, he got more than 30% of the votes when he ran against Hickenlooper and Dan Mays, who was the Republican candidate.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. What do you make of Tancredo's claim and why he is, quote, infuriated?
Well, you can't believe everything you hear on television, even on high-quality public television, because the group that he was speaking at is called V. Dare, named for Virginia Dare, who was the first English child born in North America. Whatever you think of their views, they were not the organizers of the rally in Charlottesville, had nothing to do with it. And the person who came out the worst in this whole thing was John Suthers, who, the mayor of Colorado Springs, who said, "Oh, we're not going to provide police protection for the event." After all his career of being a sincere law and order guy, to do something that lawless and say, "Oh, if you want to have a riot here and attack people, go right at it. The Colorado Springs police will stand aside." That was tremendously irresponsible of him and really takes him down. It's a huge blemish on his law and order record he's built over the years. For Tancredo in the governor's race, as Patty said, you know, he got a good share of the vote in the primary last time around, but the net effect is when primary day comes, whoever is the front runner who's not Tancredo will get lots of votes from candidates who are maybe in the third, fourth, or fifth position. That's what happened last time, as Lynn Bartles talked about in her coverage of that race. There were people who were like, "Oh yeah, I like Scott Gessler, he's my favorite," but Tancredo was doing well, and so a lot of the Gessler voters went over to Bob Beaupre because we got to stop Tancredo. So I think that will be the effect. It's going to be more important than normal for the non-Tancredo candidate. Whoever gets to that top position is going to have a big advantage, and the ones who are further back, I think there's support. It's harder than normal for them to make a move.
Eric Soderman, political analyst. A couple of things here, both what Tom Tancredo was commenting about, and then I think also, I'm not sure I'm going to call it a splintering of the Republican Party, but you see more and more Republicans mad at their own party or wanting to see something happen in their own party. They're almost running out of Clintons or Obamas to complain about. There's plenty of Republicans to complain about. What's the bigger story as you see this announcement from Tom this week?
I think the announcement is this is Tom being Tom. You referred to him earlier, Dominic, as a legend on this show, and he was. He's also become a legend in his own mind. And you know, all of us can be fond of Tom personally, and he's a wonderful, delightful guy to have a cup of coffee or a beer with. But Tom has fallen in love with the sound of his own voice. And at some point, he needs to let one of these gubernatorial races go. He thinks he has to be a part of every race every year. And I'm being a bit harsh here, and I would hope some people would take it to heart. Tom ran, yes, he got 35% of the vote against John Hickenlooper and some nobody named Dan Mays. But, you know, they don't elect governors on 35% of the vote. And Tom's high water mark is in that 35 to 40% category. That's all he can do. He has run for governor now twice in the last few cycles, and he has lost both times and not come terribly close. Once in a primary, once as a nominal Republican but third-party candidate in a general election. Tom Tancredo is not going to be the next governor of Colorado. He, at this point, if he gets in, and I don't underestimate his ability to get into the race. He's gotten into other races. If he gets in, he becomes a sideshow, but it's a compelling sideshow. And as you pointed out, it's just further indication of the splintering and polarization, fragmentation of the Republican Party. As to the conference, I mean, David makes a good point as to the Colorado Springs Police Department. But I don't think there's anyone stronger on this panel or other panels in terms of believing in free speech. But yet free speech doesn't compel a private business, in this case the Cheyenne Mountain Resort, to provide a venue or host such a conference. And they were well within their rights, and I applaud them for saying, we don't want this particular reprehensible crowd here.
Penfield Tate, attorney at QTAC Rock, also a longtime state lawmaker. Lots of things to pick from here. You have both the actual event being canceled in Colorado Springs and Tom Tancredo's reaction to it and the whole idea of Republicans in the governor race in 2018. Take your pick.
I would offer, despite his legendary status, there's probably no politician now more out of step with Colorado and America than Tom Tancredo. He can look at the race all he wants. Frankly, he should have looked at it in 2010 and looked at it in 2014 rather than running. And he didn't get 35% of the vote against John Hickenlooper in 2010. He got 35% of the vote against Dan Mays because he clearly had no business being in the race. And that just showed how far gone the Republican Party was at that time. You know, Eric's right. Tom's a delightful guy when you talk with him one-on-one, but the fundamental problem is some of the positions he takes are just offensive. The reality is the vast majority of Coloradans and the vast majority of Americans and the vast majority of Republicans aren't bigots and racist. And you know, you can couch this as being a champion of free speech, but the vast majority of all of those groups who aren't bigots and racists say free speech is one thing, but we don't want to be exposed to a bunch of people spewing all this racist, anti-Semitic hatred. We just don't have a place for it and don't want a place for it in a country like America. That's basically what this boils down to. So he can be outraged. He can criticize all the Republicans for not pandering to this. But, you know, that's part of the problem that President Trump is having and the Republican Party's having when they're feeding on each other, because they've let the bigots like Steve Bannon and his group take over and become the voice and the face of the Republican Party when the vast majority of Republicans don't feel the way they do.